Joe Kenn, welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast. Thank you very much for joining me.
Hey, thank you. I'm very excited to be here and humbled when anybody reaches out to ask me to be a part of their show. So thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely my pleasure. So obviously you're based in the US, but I think your name and I think your reputation definitely crosses the Atlantic. So plenty of guys over here will have heard of you and what you've done, especially because I remember listening to you in I think 2014.
I believe that was it, right before we went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, so the UKSA conference in East Midlands. So yeah, I remember that very well. But anyone that doesn't know who you are, would you mind just giving us a brief background? Because I know there's been a few changes recently. I'd be interested to know what you've been up to.
Yeah, so my name's Joe Kenn. I am a 32-year veteran of the strength and conditioning game. I've been in the United States level. I've been at high school, collegiate, and the professional levels. Spent 2 years at the high school level coming out, 19 years in college, 9 years in the NFL, and 1 year in the private sector. And then now I'm in my second year in a different space, but still in the fitness field as the Vice President of Performance Education for Dynamic Fitness and Strength. And the great thing about that is it allows me to stay grounded with the strength and conditioning career, the field, the coaches, and allows me to do cool things like this and to continue to mentor coaches across the country and overseas also. As you know, I've been very, very fortunate that a lot of my training modalities have reached overseas, and I've had people from over there, UK, Germany, Japan, China have reached out saying that they've read my book and really love the way I've planned on athletic-based strength training from a practical standpoint. But yeah, it's been a good space. I played college football, so without sports, probably no one would know me. Because I was very fortunate. My parents worked extremely hard, but I needed a scholarship to go to college. And fortunately for me, I had a good enough skill set to play football and really good coaches to help me enhance those skills to move on to college. And I would say the biggest thing for most people, because every generation is different, depending on when you first heard of me, people see me as a football guy, and rightfully so. But the truth is, I started my college career as an Olympic sports strength coach. So I've been exposed personally to, I've coached uniquely myself with my hands on them, 10 sports over my career, and my programming and the universities that I've worked with, my programming model and template has worked with over 20 sports. So I pride myself on the fact that I became a strength coach to work with any athlete. Obviously, you're going to gravitate towards certain sports based off who you are and what you are. For me, it was football, and the ideal for me, the ultimate goal was to be an NFL strength coach. But I didn't get into it to be what I call in nowadays a sports-specific strength coach. I got into it because I love the weight room and I saw what it can do to enhance an average person's performance and make them above average and to succeed at a higher level than most. And that was my ultimate goal. But I have I love women's sports. Like, I think that those gave me, the women athletes that I worked with gave me the true wherewithal to understand how to coach. The fact that those athletes were very wanting, like they wanted to be coached. They love the fact that we invested time in them. They didn't see it like, well, they saw it like, golly, they really care about us. Where a lot of times male athletes, it's just part of the deal, right? Well, you're the strength coach, you're supposed to do this and that. And the coaches too, I think the coaches at the Olympic sports back in the day, remember, it wasn't like it is now over in the States where almost every sport now has their own strength coach, especially in basketball, baseball, and football, and even some in soccer. When I was in school, when I got into college strength and conditioning, it was myself as a GA and the head strength coach, and we had 17 sports. Let's go. So it's a lot different now. We worked. I mean, you would run out, stretch the football team, run back in, train 5 sports, run back out, post-stretch and condition the football team, and then run back in to do gymnastics. I mean, that was an afternoon daily. So I like to remind people that the programming that I believe in is for any sport. It's very easily adaptable. We made it that way. It's been highly sustainable. And I credit that to the coaches who believed in that process, all the athletes that worked with us, and all the staff that worked with us who are willing to pave the way to push this thing to, I thought it was a niche deal, and now it's a world recognized system. And a lot of, we continue to this day, it continue to expose more people to it through internet, through podcasts like yourselves, through the book still being, published. They begging me to write a second book, and it's coming sooner than later because we're building out some cool stuff. But in the end, I keep going, why do I need to write a new book when everybody's still loving the first book? So for me, it's been a 32-year journey. I feel like it's been incredible, right? I've been very, very humbled by the athletes who allowed me to be a part of their careers. I think that as a strength and conditioning coach, you should always, I don't want to say you should always be in the shadows, but that's kind of the position we're in, a shadow position. We're a support to the athlete to benefit them at the highest levels, to give them the best opportunities to protect themselves and to enhance their physical performance and be able to provide things from a mental standpoint, a physical standpoint, a personal standpoint, a professional standpoint to the best of our capabilities. I mean, coaching's teaching, teaching is communication, and that's the one thing that I don't think will ever go away. I don't think artificial intelligence will never be able to communicate like two human beings.
So it's the fact that you've been around for 32 years. I don't think we've got a strength coach, fitness coach over here that's been around for 32 years. I don't think it's been here for 32 years. So that's the reason I wanted to get you on, because there's so much that we can dive into. But one thing that I'd really like to get your opinion on, and it's the longevity. Like 32 years is a long time. So how do coaches now, I don't know that things have changed over those 32 years, a lot has changed over those 32 years, but how do the young coaches now, or the more established coaches, generate that longevity that you have in this game? And the one thing that I wanted to mention was, it was once about the hustle, the grind, the get in early, you leave late. Now it's almost flipped, where you've got this coach health undercurrent, which I think is a great thing, and that's definitely building. So you've got these two conflicting thought processes going on. I'd just like to get your thoughts on both of them.
Well, it's funny you say about I was just having this discussion, and I've said this at a couple of presentations about being the first one in and the last one out, right? And it takes a while. Like, you get to that point where now you're like making significant impacts, and you're overthinking. It's like when you get your knowledge and it becomes wisdom. Like, for example, you want to be the first one in, right? Because you want to impress everybody. But who are you impressing if you're the first one in? No one that you're trying to impress is there yet. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I got to be the first one in the building. Why? If no one's there to know you were the first one in, you could be, you could come in and say, I was the first one in today. And then the same thing, got to be the last one out. Well, who are you impressing? Because the people that you're trying to impress already left. And I think, and that's that prisoner to their death syndrome that we all get into. Like, well, we can't leave till, so-and-so leaves, or we can't do this till so-and-so. And it's like, hey, if I'm more efficient and more structured in my day, it's better for me to leave so that I got more energy for tomorrow. Coaches sleeping. You hear about coaches sleeping in their office during the seasons and watching film and stuff. There's only so much film you can watch before you're overanalyzing it. If you watch the same play 100 times, the play's not changing. The guy missed a block the first time, he missed a block the 100th time. So there's things like that. And from a longevity standpoint, it's really, can you commit to the come up? I call it the come up because the come up's hard, and it's only getting harder in this day and age for the young strength and conditioning professional in the States, because the game has changed from the jobs and the roles that are available to them. For example, and we've done a poor job as administrators and leaders of adjusting what we're asking these young strength coaches to have from an experience or an educational level than it was when I first started. For example, when I first started, I would say, I don't want to say 100 because that'd be a high percentage of strength and conditioning coaches started as graduate assistants because no one was funding full-time positions. Very, very rarely. It was the head guy and GAs. And that made it easy for a lot of us to get a master's degree and 2 years of experience. Because GAs back in the day, you got a tuition waiver and a stipend. So you got your school paid for and you got the capabilities to be a strength coach in a university athletics department setting. Well, as the roles have, as staffs increased, the rule of the 5 strength coach for football evolved. Now there's a push for multiple full-time assistants. But we're still asking for masters and 2 years of experience when a lot of the bigger schools don't offer GAs anymore. So there's a limited factor in what schools are offering full tuition waiver graduate assistantships where you can still get your master's +2. And we've got to accept that that's not the norm anymore to ask masters +2, because what's happening is there's more strength coaches now that didn't participate in college sports than ever, because now people are like, wow, that's a cool deal. And, you know, the education's changed. And now when I'm sure we're going to talk about the sports science and the technology that's changed. And now you got a whole different outlook on what's going on. So it's gotten tougher. So we've got to understand, the administrators got to understand that when we're building out these roles for these strength coaches to come up the gradual plane of succession, is some of them are making hard choices. Okay, people are telling me it's education. But is it education? Because now you're telling me I need experience. So from that standpoint, it becomes a matter of, do I choose education where now I can't find a GA, so I've got to take a loan out to finish school, versus, okay, do I go for the internship where it's unpaid, so I got to get a job to help pay the bills, so I can't go to school? And that's the conundrum that the student athlete or the student who wants to be a coach has to fall into at this point in time in their careers. So that's the tough sell for those guys, male and female, because a lot of them, got to make those choices, and that's a hard choice. Me personally, I would tell you to get the experience, because I'm going to hire experience first. The school, I think in this day and age with online, you can get the schooling when you're financially capable. But if you're going to make a sacrifice early, I think you need to sacrifice for experience, because, the master's to me is preferred status. A lot of times now at the higher level positions, we're seeing that a master's is required. So at some point in time, a lot of people are going to have to get a master's degree. But even now, like even my son, I've told him, man, you're going to wind up having to get a PhD. So those are the things that you have to look at. The longevity is, can you stick it out? You see a lot of people say they want to be in this position, and then what we find out is, a couple of years later, I can't afford to do it, or I'm burnt out. I don't see I don't see the opening in sight. Am I going to land a full-time job? How many internships for free can I do? It's very, very tough, and I feel for the coaches that are in it now, because even though there's so many more jobs available full-time, the pool has increased 100 times over. So that's the toughest part really is, can you commit to it long term?
So Joe, based on that and everything you just said there, how's the value of a strength and conditioning coach changed over the 32 years? I'm sure there's been ups and downs, the strength and conditioning profession, but obviously many more members of staff and positions available for young strength and conditioning coaches, as we've said. But in terms of administration, head coach, technical coaches, how they view the strength and conditioning coach, how has that changed over the 32 years?
Yeah, having been at all, and again, I can only speak for the States. Having been in all the platforms of the different stages of high school, professional, and college, I would say first and foremost, the importance at the high school level in the United States has grown exponentially. There's a lot more strength coach only positions where coaches don't have to coach multiple sports and, they run the weight room. There's full-time positions now in private and public schools that the strength and conditioning coach or a lot of times if you're in the public school system, you do have to be certified to teach, but you're explicitly there to be the strength and conditioning coach and to run the advanced PEs, so to speak, or the athletic-based strength training courses for the athletes that are on site. So from the protection standpoint and from the teaching standpoint, where you're bringing in, not somebody who just happens to know where the weight room is, but somebody whose goal in life is to help teach and explain training modalities and exercise technique. The high school level is exponentially a legitimate job. Like that wasn't to say, and I would say it's really blown up in the last 5 years. College is all dependent on what sports you work with. I mean, there's high value in colleges, particular in football and basketball, but now a lot of the other Olympic sports are showing value in that they want their own strength coach for their sport because of the amount of time and commitment that they're asking that coach to do. They want them to travel. They want them to be more involved in the overall yearly process of the plan, not just run a weight room and run my kids. They're getting very more specific on what's asked to doing. As technology has improved, over here, soccer was probably one of the first teams to go all in on heart rate variability. And I think that comes because soccer is a dominant sport overseas. So that's going to trickle down first and foremost. And then, so I think soccer from a standpoint over in the States has been at the forefront of bringing technology into the standard strength and conditioning programming. In the professional level, it's a lot different, I believe. I think that the models have changed. And the toughest thing is, to be honest with you, what I've seen being away from the last couple of years, and I brought this up to a lot of people and they tend to agree, is strength and conditioning coaches sometimes are their own worst enemy, especially the ones who came up at the time that I did, because it was about, put your head down, do the work, coach your kids, work them hard, and all the other stuff that right now to me is kind of, man, we blew it when it comes to our profession and career. And a lot of people still really don't know what that role is. Like, what do these guys do except just watch guys lift weights or watch women lift weights? And what's also happened too, as like you brought up, there's a lot of things have changed. So when we all first started years ago, it was an athletic trainer was always already there in place. And then here comes the strength coach. But we also acted, both of us, trainers and strength coaches, we had to act as nutritionists. We had to act as, in some ways, sports scientists, right? With data collection and evaluating what's going on in that particular sport or an individual athlete. And we had to be, the psychological fact, someone where a kid could come in the office and shut the door and have a, heart-to-heart or somewhere where they could voice their concerns or what's going on in their personal life without having to talk to a coach, their position coach or their sport coach. So we were holding several hats that now become specific jobs, and rightfully so, right? You can only really be an expert in one thing, and we're hanging our hats and multitasking numerous different, subject matter experts, and we're trying to mesh that all into one. So now you used to have strength coach, athletic trainer. First you had athletic training, and then you had some people work in the weight room. Then people realized, okay, you got strength coaches and athletic trainers, and then they filled the secondary role of nutrition, education, data collection. We've always turned in and collected numbers in strength and conditioning. That's what it started as, right? Oh, how much did your squat go up every year? What's your team averages and all the other stuff? How fast did they run 40s? What's their 20 time? What's their vertical jump? And then also from we didn't even know it was called, mental health. It was you became someone that athletes could lean on and get another person that didn't control their money or playing time, somebody they could rely on to voice their, whether it's frustration or issues at home or what was going on in their personal life, without getting, I don't want to say scared, but not having to relay that to a position coach or a head coach where it could affect their scholarship in some ways. But now what we've found is you need a nutritionist, like someone who's got the skill set and the expertise in sport nutrition and is a registered or licensed dietitian. Obviously, in this day and age, it's been proven you need a mental health expert. You need someone that can do those things, that has the necessary skill set as well as the education to just not pat somebody on the back and say, hey man, it'll be okay. We got to figure it out. They know what they understand. They have the tools. They have the, what do you call them? Like the testing or the surveys that take to get to understand, even with like learning disabilities and things like that. Like why is this athlete having so much trouble, getting from one point to point A to point B? What are we missing? They understand the signs, the help more than we would, and then from the sports science, with the increase in technology, there's always been data collection. What sports science and technology have done is gives you a lot of affirmation to what a lot of us were doing, like we talked earlier off screen, anecdotally. How strong is strong enough? Well, how fast is fast enough? We're seeing a lot of paradigm shifts in KPI measurements, right? Like in football, 40 time, 40 time, 40 time. Well, now people are saying, well, mile per hour, mile per hour, mile per hour, where we could never do that without some type of GPS monitoring system. Everything was based on seconds covered in a certain amount of time. But now we can see, how fast an acceleration, more specific to time than just a time on a stop clock. So that evolution has put the strength and conditioning coach in an interesting site. In my short time when I was overseas, it was obvious that the high performance manager, whatever that title may entail, had more authority in how things were going to be dictated than the strength and conditioning coach. And over here, the strength and conditioning coach was always the go-to for the sport coach. And what we're seeing is, as advances in technology, as education, as data becomes more prominent and analytics becomes this new wave, the traditional strength coach is taking a hit. I don't mean that to be to sound like, you're talking about. Hey man, I've lived this profession for 32 years. I've earned the right to say my opinion, and I've earned the right to be wrong. I just think that we are losing our voice because individuals who have constant contact with higher ups in the organizations and administratings are able to fulfill a role in a different means than a strength coach, but also tell those higher ups what the strength coach's role should be. So it's an interesting time to be what I would call a traditional strength and conditioning coach. If you're in my age bracket, you better get off your butt and get dialed in on science. Now, I'm not telling you got to be a sport, you got to go into that whole sports science realm, because there's always going to be value in somebody having to be on the floor, teaching exercise technique, communicating with athletes on the ground level, but you're going to need to know more than you think you know. The last 2 years, I've really done a good job personally of understanding that space more, and what we had available to us with the Panthers, what we used from a team standpoint, what I used, and more critical about how to look at certain things and metrics that information gives you. Velocity-based training is 80% looks different for other people. Now you can manipulate percentage-based training based off of how fast certain people move that load. I still think it's a combination of both. A lot of people are hanging their hat purely on what velocity-based training says, but let's remember, all of those wearables, all of those devices still have margins of error that we need to understand. That nothing is set perfectly. If I use one velocity-based training and it looks like I'm super fast, and then train to another system, well, their algorithm might say, well, you ain't as fast as you think. So we've all got to be aware of that and use the data accordingly. Give us a range, give us some consistent effort if we stay with the same product. No different than body fat, right? If you do calibers, then you got to do calibers. If you do DEXA, you got to do DEXA. If you do bod pod, you got to do bod pod. If you do bioelectrical impedance, you got to stay with that, because if you keep varying those different types of norms, you're going to get 20 different types of data, and you're not going to be able to show if the kid or the athlete improves or not. So I think that the evolution of what we do is each thing now has a specific role. Like there's specific categories, so you can really be specific in what your role is. In my particular deal, it would be strength and power development but there's going to be a lot more feedback, right? You're going to have more of a team approach into what that looks like, because you're going to have an expert in sports science that tells you this. That person's going to help in return to play. So then you're going to team up with the athletic trainers. And I even believe you should have a rehab specialist. You should have sports rehabilitation for post-surgical planning should be another arm of that new, what I call a horizontal hierarchy approach. And that's where someone that's in that high performance position would have merit, because they would be the moderator of all these experts. Someone to help put everybody into place where at the end of the day, it's an athlete-centered model. It's not well, I'm the strength coach, it's about me, or I'm the science guy, it's about me, or I'm the nutritionist. Everything we do should be athlete-centered. And when people figure that out and can come to conclusions, it's not about whether I like you or not. If you're working next to me, it's, in the end of the day, whether I like you or not, or whether I believe in what, we all got to come together to make sure that the athlete is cared for.
Yeah. Just want to move us on a little bit. And another thing that you see now, you go on social media, and I always seem to say when you go on social media, but it's such a big part of our lives. And you go on there and you see coaches talking between themselves or big discussions. And you hear, just do the basics well. Like, it's a popular thing to list, like, get your decent nutrition, get your decent sleep, lift 3 times a week. Like, hundreds and hundreds of likes on these kind of posts. But when it comes to just do the basics well, no one seems to tell anyone else what those basics actually are. And everyone seems to agree, just do the basics well. But what are the basics to you?
Well, I think anything, it starts with movement. So, it all goes back to like your protocols. What is the basics? And again, I think Dan John, and I don't want to misquote Coach, because he seemed to be the one that put it out, right? Squat, hinge, upper body push, upper body pull, and a carry or something into that modality. And I think that when you look at it from a holistic approach, everybody's going to have their different choices, but most of the time, a quality squat pattern, regardless of what your choice is, a quality hinge pattern, and I talk about hinges more of could it be an Olympic lift or is typical of a deadlift or even an RDL? But in the end, it comes down to, what's the correct press? The debate of overhead pressing versus bench pressing. And some people don't believe in overhead pressing, where if you got healthy shoulders, I think it's ideal because you're in a upright, unless we're training adaptive athletes. Most of the team sports that most of us deal with, we're going to have athletes on 2 feet. So the standing overhead press, balance, coordination, core strength, stability, those have a lot of merits. Applying force into the ground in an upright position. So it all goes back to what the coach believes in these general groups are. Obviously, sprinting is important, right? And so guess what? So's lateral sprinting. And so's being able, and in some respects, being able to sprint backwards and being very multidextrous when you're building out these plans, especially in our roles. We talk about general physical special preparation specialist versus specific. There's always an intertwine. But I mean, when we look at it from just an overall concept, the strength and conditioning coach, their main goal is the generalist part of it and some general specific. The sporting coach is, depending on what the role is, if it's the position coach, then their number one goal is the sport specific technical aspects of the position. Then you have the coordinators who enhance the schematics and some of the tactical. And then you have the head coach who oversees the overall culture and the overall dynamics of what the team's going to look like from a physical, mental, different types of philosophy standpoint, if that makes sense. So I think when you're asking to me, it goes back to whatever you choose. And I've gone full circle with, should you be a back squatter? Should you be a front squatter? Should you be a no squatter? Should you be a one-leg squatter, right? And then you find your niche and you find out where there's a lot to gravitate to, and you listen. I think the biggest thing is whatever your fundamentals are, that they are extremely competent and efficiently taught to your athletes. I think that's the key. If sprinting matters, then teach them how to sprint to the best of their ability. If squatting matters, whatever that squat looks like, make sure it's technically efficient, because I'm tired of watching, the kids take the blame for poor coaching. I mean, you see it all the time. You see these lifts on social media, and you see the team cheering these kids, but then every coach, look at that technique, that kid's horrible. Well, the kid's only doing what the coach allowed him to do. So don't get on the kid, get on the coach if you believe it's that piss poor. And that's certain things that happen on social media. Like I laugh, like we were giggling, right? I laugh at certain things, how coaches, hey man, you ain't getting your point across in 140 characters in Twitter, especially someone like myself. So there's a lot of times I stay out of the Twitter wars that people like, come on, House, jump in. I'm not jumping in. It's not it's not worth my time, and it's not worth my opinion to stir the pot. And some guys like stirring the pot. And
some guys love
so for
stirring
me,
the pot.
I just sit back and watch. And when I think there's something that I could have value in, just dropping a quick deal without going too crazy into like one of the extremes, I don't mind giving my opinion here and there. But if you really want to know my opinion, call me up and I'll discuss all day behind the scenes, because that, I think we could have a more educational and a more logical debate if we both disagree on something. And I think in the end, a lot of times we still may agree to disagree, but we're going to have a more of a respect level and an understanding of each's opinion. Like we may meet in the middle, like, hey, you know what? You're right. Like with Mike Boyle, he has some interesting concepts when it comes to training what I call the squat patterns. And Mike was a big factor in me really early in my career of really evaluating where the front squat fit in. Because I was hey, we're back squatting. And we're back squatting is it. I don't care about anything else. We're going to get real good at back squatting, and that's just the way it is. And as I got older, I was like, whoa, now, and listening to Mike, when he was going front squat at the time, I was like, he could be on to something when it comes to athletic training athletes. To a point where I've not wholeheartedly switched, but if you ask me what's my top 4 exercises for an athlete, front squat's one of them, not back squat. And then now he's into the rear foot elevated or the single leg solution. And I'm a huge proponent in single leg training. I don't know if I could give up the bilateral because I still believe in strength. And I do think you can get very strong single leg wise. I do. But to me, I just think for athletes in general, there is merit in doing bilateral work also.
So one thing that comes up, as you can imagine, in the podcast all the time, and that's speed training. And if you would believe what you read on social media or anywhere in our industry, speed is the only thing that matters. Only thing that matters. So is that something that is the speed obsession, I think is what I've called it in the past. Is that something, again, that is detracting from the traditional strength coach? Do you think this obsession with speed is something that is warranted, especially in American football, with how the game has developed? Is that something that, again, the traditional strength coach needs to upskill on big time if they're going to keep the pace with what's going on in the industry?
Yeah, I would say the speed deal isn't overrated because of what you're seeing. Like you said, the game is way faster. Even at the professional level, it's way faster. And a lot of that's being dictated by the way the game has changed from a philosophy standpoint. It's very, very upbeat in college. Very upbeat. I don't prefer it, but that's just the way it is. And speed has become the kingpin of recruiting. I think when it comes to absolute speed, what we find in GPS tells us that a lot of times absolute speed's very rarely reached. And I don't know what more people that have more expertise in terminology, but I would call it like speed reserve to me is you want to be faster because it's kind of the same thing that I believe in lifting about being stronger is you want to be faster because that means you're going to play faster at that percentage of speed. If you run 28 miles per hour, you're going to be able to hold a lot faster than if I run 26 over a 75 play or 80 play game, or even the same thing in any sport where there's multiple movement actions over a long period of time. In the football setting, American football, there's always going to be a break between plays. So you're always going to have a recovery aspect where, when you watch soccer and rugby, there's not as many breaks. So you're going to have different speed changes, but there's generally a lot of constant movement from my studies of soccer and rugby. But there's going to be times where guys do stand around and then all of a sudden they got to accelerate. But they're very rarely even there do you see somebody hit what their maximum miles per hour would be in a standard track and field session with the strength coach. So I think that there is merit in getting someone faster because when you level it out across a playing field and you build up their conditioning, the goal is for them to maintain their highest level of relative max speed every play they're out there. So I do see that, but that was no different than us doing the same thing year after year, trying to get a guy a faster 40 time. Same type of principle. But miles per hour to me has a lot more, it makes things a lot more understandable for me moving forward, rather than because now you can track that. You can track every single play that athlete practices and every single play in a game, that you can compare the speeds that they're running at over their max miles per hour, where you can't really do that over using a 40-yard dash time, if that makes sense. So I think there's a lot of merit, and I've learned a lot about the actual speed of miles per hour the last 2 years. There's some really good I call them young coaches because they're younger than me. I'm not saying that as an inexperience, but their experience with really figuring out how to use the GPS to their advantage when it comes to linear speed development is exceptional. Like, I've been very, very impressed with what I've seen, and it's making me a better coach. So I do believe that getting someone as fast that has merit in the game. I also think their detriment is, because we're so worried about speed, we've lost some of our capability to get people strong. You're seeing that a lot in offensive linemen, in particular in football. I don't think it's affecting that many other sports, but it's definitely affecting offensive linemen. My last few years of being in the NFL, I felt like if we could redshirt offensive linemen we drafted to bring up their strength levels. Now, athleticism, they were a lot better overall than the years past, but from that pure, unadulterated, strong enough, the NFL is it's a grown man's game, and you got to have some grown man strength. So I think that's something that should be aware of when you're a strength coach at the college level for football, and as you're a strength coach in the NFL level is, and you've got to be conscientious too, because offensive linemen play more snaps than any other position. So you got to factor that in, that they got to be durable. They're going to play, I don't know, depending on different teams' rotations, but they could pay, 2 times the amount of a defensive lineman, depending on how you're subbed in and out in sub packages. Offensive linemen don't get subbed out. And that's something that people got to remember, that they have to be your best conditioned athletes. They're the biggest. They take up the most effort and stress because of the size. They play in the line of scrimmage, so they may not run as much as someone else, but the intensity of effort and the engagement of strike has to be factored in. There's a different arousal and a different anxiety level when you're hitting someone who's within a yard across for you, rather than being outside the box running and covering. It's a different animal. So I think that it's not overrated. And again, that's my opinion. I think there's a lot of merit in doing it. But you also see, and again, I don't know if it's being oversaturated. I think that's what people like to talk about. And what's happened now on TV is, everything is, he ran 22 miles per hour in this game. Here's the fastest guys from this weekend's game. But I think a lot of these strength coaches who have enhanced their ability with technology to understand linear speed and maximizing that, these same guys are doing acceleration training too, because they understand most sports is accelerative. So they're doing some things from a linear speed and a lateral speed stuff where they're using the technology available to look at how well guys are improving their acceleration capabilities, whether it's a 3-yard run into a flying 10 or a dead start flying 10, or lateral movement work with seeing how fast they can accelerate laterally. So there's some cool things being happening. So I think it's like anything else. What does the fan want to see? And that's what we post. Like, what does everybody want to see? No one wants to see your 10-yard dash acceleration times. Everybody wants to see who's running the fastest miles per hour. Like no one's showing, hey, this guy did 10 jumps this week and his average was 35, but his best was 40. They want to see the 40. So I think that, and again, I don't know if I would have said that if I was still in the game, but being outside the game and being able to study different perspectives, I see where it's going, and I see where there's a paradigm shift with this miles per hour, and I actually like it. I think there's more we can do with miles per hour because, like I said, you can evaluate that based off of every play of every practice and every game, where you can't do that with a stopwatch.
So for the last 15, 20 minutes, because I'm going to keep you to the hour. I know you've got the world record for longest podcast.
So you're saying we're going to do a part two down the road or something?
Absolutely, why not? But one thing I want to dive into is obviously the tier system. But one thing I want to touch on, again, another thing that has probably has definitely gained some traction over the last 5 or 10 years, and that's loaded jumps, trap bar jumps, jump squats, etc. And the debate of whether they can take the place of traditional Olympic lifting and their derivatives. Within your system and within your thought process around programming, how do you tackle that? Because I know you're a big Olympic lifter.
I think that,
but does loaded jumps
so it's very simple
or complementary?
I'll be honest with you. I've never done I can't say I'd never, but I don't recall the last time I might have prescribed a loaded jump in my training plan. Well, if you consider putting a weight vest on, that might be like a trap bar jump or a jump squat. I don't know if I have done anything like that since I was at Boise State. It just I couldn't tell you a real live, honest answer why that is. We do a lot of trap bar shrug pulls, and if a guy comes off the ground, maybe you want to kill it. But here's what I'll tell you. Everything falls into the exercise pool. How you establish your exercise pool and your terminology is, I look at it as whole movements. And one thing we started as athletes graduated through our plan, like I call it a quadrennial plan or modified long-term athletic development, because when I coach high school and when I coach or when I recommend the high school and when I recommend the colleges, look at the athlete's career in a 4-year quadrennial model. So you bring them in, you teach them teach them how to read a card, teach them how to squat, teach them all this stuff, and then as they continue to evolve through your program, you can expose them to more complexities or more cool different exercises. Like I just like to use the word cool, right? They learn the basics, they master the mundane, they master the fundamental lifts, and then you can do all the variations off those lifts. And what happens is when you're with high level athletes and even any athletes, you got to remember, we're not training a sport with a sport. We're trying to take these strength disciplines and utilize different movements and different exercises to enhance them in their general athletic ability, which if they learn their position specifics, we hope to have a better performance on the field. So loaded jumps to me, and jumps in particular, they fall into what I call my total body category for exercise pool. So we started doing jumps in our tier 4 and 5 movements when I was in college, because you get these, especially with the outside the box or the skilled athletes, and then the other sports it was easier. But when it came to football, was hey, guy's been in your program 4 or 5 years and he's a wide receiver. Does he really still need to do snatch pulls? Right? But so he doesn't want to do them. You're fighting with him. But you know what he wants to do is he'll do a box jump. And you'll prescribe 5 sets of 5 box jumps, and the next thing you know, you got 20 kids over there trying to out box jump each other, and they're competitive. They're doing the work you want. It's eliciting a response you want. And guess what? I win, because I'm not fighting them anymore, or they're not hiding in the bathroom during snatch pulls. So to me, jumping, loaded jumps, I don't care, med ball throws, that falls into my total body category. So when I write my plans for the tier system, depending on the age of the athlete, the level of training age of the athlete in particular, will determine how many barbell types of lifts I may use for explosive strength, and how many jumps or med ball types of exercises I would use for explosive strength, if that makes sense. So for me, that's a simple answer. I utilize all Olympic lifts, loaded jumps, strongman carries, and anything and hip hinge work like hip thrusts. Anything with hip extension or total body movement is a total body movement. And it's easy for me to classify, it's easy for me to define, and it's easy for me to justify. So it makes it real easy for me when I'm looking at my template. Okay, I want these guys to jump instead of do these Olympic lifts. Where do I put it in?
Let's talk about prioritization and how you may prioritize certain exercises for certain individuals. What's your checklist when it comes to there's a gap?
Yeah, it goes to experience. It goes to where they came from. It goes to how long that I've trained them. A big thing with me in the NFL was if I got a guy who's been with the team for 10 years and trained the same way for 10 years under the same strength coach, I need to know what exercises he is familiar with. I need to know which exercises he likes. I know which exercises he doesn't want to do anymore. Because at 10 years, you're teaching me how to stay in the NFL as much as I'm hoping I can help you stay longer. So it goes to then we establish that guy's exercise pool. Like, for example, have an athlete that comes to me, he's a wide receiver, says, hey, House, man, I just don't want to squat anymore. He goes, I don't want to I don't want to do, and I said, well, what do you like? He goes, well, I like doing split squats. Fine. Split squats will be your tier 1 exercise, and we'll build out all the rest. But then, we didn't necessarily clean some of our skill guys. But he goes, but I do like doing cleans. Okay, perfect. On Fridays, tier 2, you'll clean, and I'll just move you over with some of the tight ends and the fullbacks and some of the linemen because we clean on Fridays after bench. So it's as simple as that. I mean, it's you can't be rigid. The higher the level of the athlete, and the more advanced they are, you cannot be rigid in a year-round program. And that's where like the conjugate method and variability is so important because. And that's where experience and knowledge and wisdom comes in because you just continue to build this toolbox. And you want to expose the athletes to one, what they will do to give you the effort needed. So, hey, coach, man, I don't do Olympic lifts. Fine, I could care less. Let's do some seated box jumps. Oh yeah, I'm cool with that. It's just simple as that. I mean, now at the lower levels, there's certain things I want these athletes to learn because I think it's a necessity that they're not experienced enough to know yet what works for them. So we're all figuring it out. But as the athlete gets older, they know a lot and they can give you that through communication. And then it's up to your expertise to figure out, okay, what fits this? What exercises can we do to help this? If they've got an issue that they're concerned about. It's like now when I'm working with a high-level strongman competitor who's had some hamstring issues in a particular deadlift. Okay, well, we evaluate that process. What's going on? What do we need to fix? What is my recommendations? And then we put that plan in place, and hopefully we can rectify those situations. It's the same thing. It's people call it a basic needs analysis. It's a combination of all of that. And again, it goes back to understanding that, in some cases, one size, people talk about cookie cutter. In some size, one size does fit all. Basic things is, squat pattern, deadlift pattern, like we said. There's certain things that everybody should learn. And that comes at an early age.
Joe, you've mentioned variation there a couple of times, and I've got that written down. And is variation something that is important to you, which you consciously program in variation, or is variation something that happens anyway that you can guarantee you're going to have to vary the plan on a weekly basis because of shoulder issues, knee issue, illness? It's going to happen anyway. Or is
variation is critical,
especially
in the upper level advanced athletes that I'll train it'll be programmed cyclical. But now you're talking about, to me, what I call unique auto-regulation, especially in season, where, okay, I'm already rotating these things, but this guy's got issues. So now you're going to really go what I call off the script work, right? You're just going to rebuild a plan. And a lot of times with some of these guys at the season, it is daily. It's, how do you feel? Okay, come back tomorrow. How do you feel? Go get treatment. Come back tomorrow. How do you feel? Okay, let's just do this. How do you feel? But so there's variability in the structure of the planning, and that's based off of, specific, let's just call specific weeks. Every 3 or 4 weeks, we're flipping. Just again, establish a stance, get away from the monotony. These guys are well prepared. They're competent in all these movements. Then it's the daily auto regulation of individuals who are high volume guys in practice, play more snaps than anybody else in the game, come back on Monday, who's more beat up than others. So a lot of that comes down to, during the competitive season, a lot of that comes down. And then you'll have your plans I don't like to call it off season, but everybody calls it off season. There's never, when you're talking to guys and you're building out their plans, and there's just, you have the basic structure of the plan, and then they'll come in with their unique movements like we talked about. Hey, House, these are the movements that I really think I need to concentrate on. And then I'll be, okay, well, these 3 are part of the plan. This one wasn't. This is where that fits. Cool. And again, you've got to have confidence in your own capabilities. And that was one great thing for me about the template of the tier system. And again, it's a lot of these terms people hate, right? But it's plug and paste. Here's the exercises I like. What can you do with them? Perfect. Here's the week. Boom, 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 boom. Go. No big deal. I have no issues with that. I mean, everybody's got their flavor. And in the end of the day, most of my guys, even though there was a lot of guys training with different unique capabilities or movements that they liked, it was still within the template that I believe in. So it was the best of both worlds for all of us. I win because it's still something I believe in from a structure standpoint. They win because they're getting the movements they want in the program, which means we win if it all works.
As I promised,
all right,
I'm going to keep it to the hour. So if it means a part 2 and it means a part 3, that's absolutely fine. But we'll keep it. We'll keep it to the hour. But anyone that wants to get to know more about what you've got going on, or previous work that you've done in the past, the book, for example, where's the best place to?
Well, I mean, like you said, in this day and age of social media, Instagram and Twitter is at Big House Power. My website is bighousepower.com. That has some of my educational stuff that I have available. We're getting ready to do some different things. We're going to do a online course on neck training that's going to be out. Then my next project will be an online course on athletic-based strength training, utilizing Prilipin's chart, percentage-based training. And then the two big ones will be the mentorship for the tier system, which will probably turn into some type of certification, in quotes, types of certificate program. And then those, especially in the States, that know the Block Zero concept of introducing structured, organized strength training to the novice and beginners. Those are the big projects that'll be later on. We're trying to, build up our catalog of stuff that's being done web-based, and we feel like the neck and the shoulder and posterior shoulder and just protecting the head in this day and age of concussions and stuff and how much that's raved, that's a key. So we've decided as a group of my team that would probably be the right one to start with, and we're going to team up with some cool people with that to really help promote it across all sports and overseas, in the States, anywhere we can, to be effective when it comes to helping to protect our athletes and be safe.
Sounds good to me.
Great
mission. Great mission. Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Brilliant. Well, I'll signpost people to the website and to your social medias. So that's perfect. But Joe, thank you very much for giving up an hour of your time, an hour and a half, potentially 2 hours before we even hit record.
Yeah.
There was plenty of chats going on. So thank you very much for giving up your time. Keep in touch.
Yes, and I appreciate and thank you very much, and I hope we didn't bore anybody.
No, absolutely not. Thanks,
All right,
mate.
we'll talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
mate.